Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
I'm Ben Matlock.
And we're back. I wasn't sure about this week. We're getting close over here. So it's touch and go. We might get halfway through the podcast and I'll be like, oh, I guess I kind of got to take my wife to the hospital.
That's how pregnancy works, right? It's like it could be tomorrow, could be a year from now. We never.
It's not to that extent, but you do get into a certain window, and it's funny because I was talking to somebody at work today, and your typical oh, how are you today, and whatever, and they're like, oh, I'm good. It's at least almost the weekend, right? And it's like, yeah, but
you don't get a weekend.
You might be when you might be having a kid at any moment, really. It every day kind of feels like that whole Friday thing of I don't know what tomorrow will be.
Right.
So
is it poor husband etiquette to ask your wife to treat having the kid going to the airport let me know 3 hours in advance just before it starts?
Right. I don't want to get all the way there and then have to turn around and come back.
Can I just drop you off the beginning of the week we think it'll happen, and I'll come back when it starts. But
I did keep saying we were lucky enough to have a 4-day weekend last week because we got the 4th on Thursday off, but we got Friday off too, and then we're closed on the weekend.
And
I kept saying you better not have her on Thursday so that my whole holiday weekend is us in the hospital. So that'll haunt her for the rest of...
Don't be a douche, kid. All right? Yeah. I'm trying to barbecue and chill.
So, her high school graduation day, she's like, Dad, you just seem mad at me. I'm like, you fucking ruined my vacation.
I could have had a 4-day weekend
17 years ago.
But you weren't even born yet, and you had to make it all about you.
But we're past that now, so she can come anytime. Yeah. That'd be great.
Yeah, preferably show up on Monday. And
that's what I'm thinking. Or Sunday afternoon,
yeah.
So I still get my weekend again, but then it's oh, darn it, I don't have to work on Monday now.
Well, I know you had that bird hanging out with you. I don't know if you still do. Oh, there she is.
She's right on cue. She can hear you.
This is bad taste, but I was like, what else is new for me? I was just imagining the bird in a mine shaft. And it's just when the kids do, the bird's dead, and oh, fuck, we gotta go.
I think you can measure it that way. Yeah.
I don't know what that would say about your kid if it's its presence just destroys wildlife, but
it'll lead to a good story for our show, at least. It's the Omen or the not the whatever.
That is the Omen.
Is it?
Yeah. You little Damien fucker, little devil.
There's also
bitch.
that what's it, the good son or the bad son? One of the.
That was Macaulay Culkin, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't he was just an asshole. Damien actually had the devil in him. And Macaulay Culkin was just a prick. And then his mom's yeah, you're right. I'm going to save Elijah Wood. That's a fucked up movie.
I know too much about both of those movies for never seeing them. But yeah, I've obviously never seen them.
I've only seen The Good Son in its entirety. I just know The Omen.
Yeah.
But yeah, not this week, but I'm sure next week we'll read the entire script of both those movies. But this week we have a new story.
Yeah, I actually got one. I didn't know if I'd get one finished or not, but I did, or at least finished in a sense of it's good enough for the show. So. We'll see how that goes. And it's funny because we keep saying it's oh, well, this isn't necessarily a horror fiction podcast, but we're not breaking the record this week. It's sticking firmly in that genre. I'm finding it more and more fun. I'm not a big horror. Like I said, I hadn't seen those movies. I don't watch a lot of horror movies. They're just...
Well, they're about on par with the stories we tend to bring to the show, so... Yeah, but you have to commit 2 hours to them, so...
That's my problem. Even horror literature, a lot of it. I think the problem is little I've seen or read of both of them tend to fall in that bad. People like it because it's so bad it's good
corny,
type. Yeah. But this will fall squarely in that. So what do I know? I'm learning even if I don't like reading it, it's a lot of fun to write.
Yeah.
So, here we go. This one's called Among the Trees, because I suck at titles.
Sounds like one of those walking games on Steam.
We need... I'll pause so you can insert some, like, lute music. Oh. Seth Adam McDowell, born February 3rd, 1995, of 6117 Buena Vista Terrace, Requa, California. The following is my sworn testimony regarding the disappearance of Ian Brown, Rachel McMullins, and Jason Gianni.
Those are some fucking names, sir. I can tell you were trying to get some good ones.
Yeah, not really. I was doing that thing in cartoons where you look around and you're like, my name is Paperclip Coffee Mug. But I was at work, so I had, like, real people's names to just, like, butcher and glue together.
But for me, it's like, I get so tired of coming up with names, and it's, like, the least important part of a story to me, that I'm always just like, fuck, Patrick. There you go.
Mine always wants to be like, oh, it's Brock Steele, and then Kent Steele, and then Steel Brick. Like, yeah.
It's just wrestler names.
Yeah, or gay porn stars, I don't know.
Usually the same thing. Like, one career leads to another.
To the other. We got started about 6:30 Wednesday morning. Packing up our gear, we prepared to head out for the day's hike. We had planned on traveling northeast along the trail, which would allow us to loop back along Bristol Falls and begin the 2-day trek back to our cars. But as we studied our maps and checked the weather, we decided on a change of plans. There was the possibility of a strong storm system moving into the area, and our original route didn't leave a lot of options if we needed to take shelter. If we traveled west, we could hike along the cliffs overlooking Acer Sound. It'd be a much more difficult hike, and ultimately we'd have to double back onto the same trail we'd hiked in on, but Jason had taken that route before and assured us that there were plenty of caves and overhangs we could use for shelter if we needed it. Plus, you can't beat the view over the Pacific. The first 2.5 hours were pretty uneventful as we snaked our way through... Oh, that's fun. Snaked our way through something. Google just signed me out in the middle. There we go. We're back.
It's like, you can't continue with this.
I don't know why the fuck it does that. I'm right back in, but it makes me... It's like, uh-oh, we're not sure you're... Whatever. Jason assured us blah, 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 blah. The first 2.5 hours were pretty uneventful as we snaked our way west. For a late spring morning, the forest was pretty quiet, but that's not uncommon when there's a storm coming. It's like the animals know, and they tend to disappear. As the morning wore on, the wind started to pick up, though at the time the sky was still clear. The noise of the breeze through the half-bare trees was both eerie and soothing. By the time we finally made it to the edge of the cliffs along the Sound, we could see the first wall of gray clouds moving in as the front pushed down from the north. It was an amazing sight, that wall of clouds moving slowly but steadily across the churning Pacific, but it meant that they were right about the storms. We continued north along the cliffs as far as we could go, before it began sloping down back towards the beach below. Rachel wanted to continue down the ridge so we could see the shore, but the climb back up would have been very difficult, even if it weren't about to start raining. So instead we decided to edge our way back into the tree line that ran along the ridge heading back inland. With the storm bearing down on us, we wanted to find some place that we could stay dry and build a fire.
This is like way too much like navigation terminology for me, because it's like anytime I go hiking or camping or any shit like that, it's just like, I don't know, let's go this way.
This way, yeah.
We'll
towards that
something.
Thing that looks neat.
There's one single squirrel who wasn't smart enough to get out of the path of the storm. He knows where to go. We'll follow him.
And I like that, like, characters in these always consult their maps. Man, I'm so fucking bad at maps on trails. We went to a park last weekend, and it's got like 4 million different trails you can take. So we'd walk 100 yards and I'd be lost. I'd look down and be like, what fucking line am I supposed to be on? Like, it's one of these, I think.
And then you find out you weren't on a line at all, and it's like,
yeah, like, wait a minute, this isn't even the right
you're
park.
actually in that one red circular area that says Bear Pit. Oh, that's weird.
As we made our way up the increasingly rocky trail, Ian slipped on a slick patch of moss and turned his ankle.
I have to leave him here.
Yep. Goodbye, Ian. First, He insisted he'd be all right, but he needed some time to walk it off before he'd be able to continue the tough climb.
What if there?
Rachel said
this is dumb, but like, what if there was just like turning your ankle turned you into a zombie? So you're just like, oh, I'll be all right, but everybody's just sort of staring at you shiftily.
It's like the Aching Dead.
Yeah. Just something really minor. It's just like, but he has to play it off like this horrible, like, oh god, I'm gonna die.
You yawn and stretch your back, and people are like, hey, is that a cramp? Fuck, kill him.
Cramp. You have to stay here and tie him to the tree.
He insisted he'd be all right, but needed some time to walk it off before he'd be able to continue the climb. Rachel said she'd stay behind with him while Jason and I decided to go ahead and look for a place to raise camp.
Raise hell.
It did. Yeah, I'm so bad with camping terminology, and it's like,
no, that's.
And I'm also like juvenile, so I didn't want to be like pitch some tents. And it's like, oh, ha, that sounds. I don't know.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
that is juvenile.
It is. And this is a serious, mature story. Oh. We stowed our heavy... Oh, I skipped a paragraph. Let's not do that. It didn't take us long, maybe 15 or 20 minutes, before we found a deep hollow with a nice slanting roof. It was set far enough back that we wouldn't have to worry about the wind or the rain, and the area was tall enough that any fire we built should be able to stay lit without filling the whole place with smoke. Which I assume is a thing. I don't know. We stowed our heavy packs and headed back to find Rachel and Ian. Our spirits were pretty high as we neared the point which we'd left them, when suddenly we could hear screaming. For a moment, we thought that Ian had injured himself worse than we had thought, and that he was now screaming in pain.
Rachel just decided we have to amputate.
Give me that spork. No, not the metal one, the plastic one.
Just a pocket knife.
Then we realized it wasn't Ian's voice we heard, it was Rachel's. We began to run as fast as we could go on the steep, rocky trail, shouting for our friends as we went. I was slightly ahead of Jason as we burst through the thick wall of brush and found Rachel standing in a small clearing. Her arms were outstretched, as if she was either reaching for something or trying to push something away, or both, and she was slowly walking backward. Her gaze was fixed on Ian, who was standing about 50 yards away, his back flat against a tree. A thick vine dangled down from above and appeared to be wrapped around his throat and body. I was about to ask how he had managed to get himself tangled in such a thick vine, but then it moved and tightened. Ian's face was losing color. I started to take a step towards Ian, but Jason grabbed me and forcefully yanked me backwards. "Look," he shouted, as two more vines slowly descended from the branches above Ian's head. The tendrils were cracked and mottled like bark, but they moved and swayed with the grace of a living creature. The way they moved was almost hypnotizing. All we could do was stare as they wormed their way down towards Ian's flailing limbs. Tenderly they touched his skin. They seemed almost apprehensive or unsure, but they were just probing. Suddenly they curled around his bare skin and contracted. The force lifted Ian up to his toes. His eyes bulged. Time seemed frozen in that moment. I can still see it when I close my eyes. Ian was looking right at me, his eyes pleading for help, his mouth opening and closing. He was crying for help, but didn't have the air to form the words. Then the tendrils tightened even further. There was a large crack, like a branch breaking, then another. But it wasn't the tree that was breaking, it was Ian. Rachel vomited. So I didn't make her shit herself, I was tempted, but...
This tree shit itself.
No, the tree nearly shit itself. It's got more pride than that. Slowly, Ian's body was lifted into the air, and that's when I saw it. A bulge flattened against the trunk of the tree, maybe 20 feet above the ground, and one large eye. Its stare was fixed not on Ian, but on the three of us. As the arms continued to lift Ian towards what I presumed was a head, the creature's body shivered and pulsed. It was excited and hungry. Suddenly, the thing shifted, and a large gaping beak extended from the mass. In seconds, Ian's body was stuffed inside, head first. The thing consumed him whole. As the beak clamped shut, you could hear its throat churning, contracting, and crunching. I felt dizzy.
Just imagine something like chewing on it like it's sunflower seeds.
This is, yeah. It's like, fuck, I wanted barbecue. It had started raining at some point, and now there was a steady downpour. The sound of rain and wind through the trees grew deafening.
like how this guy jumps, like, just witnesses something like an impossible horror, and it's like, fuck, now it's raining?
These shoes were new, damn it, that I took on this
Ian,
multi-day
you son of a bitch,
trip.
we had a camp.
I turned and looked at Jason. He was screaming something I couldn't hear, but based on his facial expression, it was something along the lines of, what the fuck?
Did you see that big tree eat our friend? It had a beak.
All the blood had drained from Rachel's face. Tears were streaming down her cheeks, but in the rain it was impossible to tell. So I don't know how he knew.
Yeah. I mean, she's a girl, so I assume she was crying in hysterics.
And admittedly, it was one of those sentences that I kind of like wrote and rewrote like 8 times until I forgot what train of thought I was on. Anyway. She had continued taking small steps backwards, and by now was a good 100 feet away from us. And that's when I saw it. Something in the tree to her right was moving. A single long arm uncoiling, so well camouflaged in both color and texture that only its movement gave it away. "Rachel!" I screamed. I'm so bad at doing voices, too.
Rachel!
Rachel! Rachel!
It's a radio drama, dude. You gotta get in it. Become the fucking useless character who just, like, describes the bad shit happening and doesn't do anything to prevent it.
You don't know how badly I wish I could do that, like, nasally, old-timey radio drama voice, by the way. Like,
oh, yeah.
I've tried and tried. I cannot do that. But, man, if we could, this would be all, like...
Our podcast would shoot right up the goddamn ladder.
She didn't seem to hear me above the din of the storm, but even if she had, it would have been too late. With incredible speed, the arm reached out and grabbed her by the ankle. Blood poured down over her shoe as the exposed skin was shredded and torn.
This is gross.
Her eyes got... I'm delving into that genre of horror, too, that I say I hate, where it's like, oh, they can't be, like, imaginatively horrible. You just have to write the gory stuff.
Yeah.
Her eyes got big as she struggled to process what had just happened, but before she could even react, the creature yanked her leg backwards, causing her to hit the ground face first with tremendous force. Her head bounced off the earth and her body went limp. It's likely that the force of the fall broke her neck, or at least knocked her unconscious. I hope to God it did, and that she didn't have to feel what was about to come next. The beast raised her into the air as she dangled upside down by her leg. A second arm moved through the air and wrapped around her torso, and then the monster began to pull. Her clothes and skin tore against the strain, until finally the weakest link gave way. With a pop that could be heard even above the storm, her knee dislocated and twisted awkwardly before the limb was torn in two at the joint. Suddenly, something grabbed my shoulder. I reached for my knife, but before I could draw it from the sheath, it grabbed my wrist. With a tug, it spun me around to face it. It was Jason. He was shouting, but I hadn't heard a word. Not because of the rain, though that probably didn't help, but because I was in shock. "Come on, we gotta get out of here, now!"
This is weird. We should leave.
Did you see where I left my phone? I can't find it.
I think Ian took my phone.
Can you go check? The creature that had eaten Ian was slowly starting to descend from the tree. I looked around me, and it seemed the whole forest had been replaced by a sea of swaying tentacles. It wasn't just one or two creatures. There were dozens of them. Hundreds, maybe. Jason shoved me forward, and I started to run. He was right behind me as we bobbed and weaved through the trees, looking for any sign of those things. I expected to be grabbed at any moment, but I pressed on, looking back only to check that Jason was right on my heels. In a moment of clarity, I headed back for the cliffside. That was the only place we'd passed in the last 3 days that gave us an area free from trees, someplace where those things couldn't hide so well, and it wasn't far. My lungs burned and my legs felt like lead weights, but I pressed on. I could see the edge of the tree line, maybe 60 yards, now 30, now 20. It was within reach. I burst through the last bits of vegetation and sprinted out onto the rocky surface. I kept running. I wanted to run all the way to the edge, as far away from the trees as I could get. Finally, I fell to my knees, gasping for breath. We had made it. At least I did. I turned, and Jason was nowhere to be seen. The storm was raging now, and the spray from the turbulent sea below crashed against the foot of the cliff. Lightning lit the sky. With each flash, I could see them. Hundreds of octopuses, octopi, because you worry about grammar when you know, life's in danger. crawling out of the woods down to the shoreline. And disappearing into the sea. I must have passed out because when I woke up it was night. I'd left all my gear back in that cavern, but I wasn't about to go back for it. I was terrified to go back into the woods, but it looked like the creatures had left, and I knew I couldn't stay here. So at first light I began making my way back. By the time I made it to the main trailhead, having gone nearly 60 hours with no food or water, no shelter or warmth, I collapsed, and that's where you found me. I hereby swear that the above account is, to the best of my recollection, true. Signed, Seth Adam McDowell. Detective Warner set down the clipboard and pinched the bridge of his nose, letting out a deep sigh. So, he said, looking at the muddy, disheveled man sitting across the table from him, you're really sticking to the story, aren't you? Jason stared back at him blankly. His hands were resting on the cold metal table, trembling slightly. Fine, it's your funeral. Warner glanced at the camera in the corner and shook his head before rising to his feet and exiting the room.
You really had to do like a fucking reaction shot?
Yes.
What a douche.
Well, my thought was, all these horror stories, and then you get like something incredibly like unbelievable. You know,
right.
If say something like that happens, there's no way you could convince anybody that happened. But you managed to survive. Everybody be like, you fucking killed those 3 people.
Right. But just like the cop being like, looking at the camera like, can you believe this piece of shit?
But that's the cops, man, right? They're dicks. They don't believe anybody. Especially with the story of tree octopuses.
I was gonna get pretty goddamn political there, but I'm not. I'm gonna hold on.
So, yeah, like I wanted to try a couple things with that one. It was
no, I liked the idea. Like, I think yeah, that would fucking suck.
the whole like, and I was curious if you had heard this. I had gotten the idea for like octopuses up in the trees, although it didn't. I guess towards the end he said they look like octopus going back into the sea. Was actually from that site that you used a lot for the first season, that Weird US.
Yeah.
And I guess it's like a thing actually out there in Washington State, where some area has this like myth that there's not myth, but this, you know, whatever, that supposedly there's these octopuses that come up onto land and like hide in the trees before going back into the sea. And of course it's like a Bigfoot type deal where it's been thoroughly debunked because they can't move very well out of water. They can, but not for long.
If it was true, it would be the funniest fucking thing ever. Like,
right. So you had to turn them into giant like man-eating octopuses, because a regular octopus, like, those things can do damage, don't get me wrong. They got sharp beaks and those like razor like suction cups, but it'd also be the size of like a cat. You'd just be walking through the woods and an octopus falls on your head and you'd be like, what the fuck?
Right.
But I also wanted to toy with the idea of doing, because like I said, most creepypasta is written from a first person perspective. So I stuck with that, but then kind of had it as like him writing down his statement. Yeah, that way it didn't have to be a first person story. So I was playing with a few things there, but that's where that came from.
Like I said, you know, that's a good kind of monster story, though. Like I liked, you know, like I said, I liked the idea of like, oh, wait, are the fucking trees doing this?
Right. And if you've seen, you know me, I love like underwater stuff, and of course one of the coolest like ocean animals is the octopus, or like the cuttlefish and that kind of thing. Because if you ever seen how they like transform in their camouflage, it's ridiculous. It's like, it's not like that gecko shit where it's like, oh, we kind of change color to sort of the thing that we're on.
Right.
It's like they match like the color and texture. Like parts of their skin get like hard and stick out, look like coral or rocks or whatever. And the idea of when like being able to blend into a tree, it would look just like a vine or a limb or something at first. You'd be like, what the fuck's going on?
So you're saying cut down all the trees and burn them because we might not know where the enemy is. I feel you. I watched Predator.
You could be wrong and you could ruin the forest, but if you're right, you've got some freshly cooked calamari right there.
Yeah. and hikers who twist their ankles will be safe.
Fucking Ian. It's his fault. If he could climb on some moss.
That's the thing.
Like, you gotta know. If you're on a, multi-day camping trip, you better know how to traverse dangerous terrain.
Yeah.
You gotta be prepared.
Our good friend Rachel in this story kind of confuses me because she's, like, paralyzed with fear, but it's like, I guess that's the only explanation, is paralyzed with fear, because it's like you stuck around to watch all this happen, but you didn't run, and you didn't do anything to help, but you didn't run away either.
No, it's totally that horror movie trope of, like, the hysterical woman that,
right,
and frankly, she's just a woman because, like, I already had 3 guy characters, and I'm like, need another one.
Right.
But it fits. It fits the cliche. Yeah.
And what was the other dude? Jason, who just, like, disappeared.
Jason.
He was, like, the only one who seemed to have his, like, shit together. So I kind of want to imagine he just found a car. Like, and just, like...
I was going to say that in part 2, it'll go back and he'll have found a sharpened stick, and he's just there fighting off hundreds of octopuses.
Yeah.
Like, die, devilfish.
The sequel to this is totally Predator, when, like, Arnold, like, fucking coats himself in mud and just, like, sets up all the traps and shit. Like, Jason's still out in the woods just fighting these fuckers.
Get to the chopper. I mean, the Jeep Cherokee.
Get to the Jeep Grand Cherokee event. At your local Jeep Grand Cherokee dealer.
Names, though. I talked about it on Twitter. I hate coming up with names of places and stuff.
That's why I name every character in my stories Jeep Grand Cherokee.
Cherokee. Chief of the Jeep tribe. No, he's not Native American.
It's not native. It's just a big fan of
New
that
Jersey.
car.
Right.
But yeah, I like that. I also like the kind of, you hear among the trees, you kind of, that sets up an expectation of, like, what type of monsters you could potentially be dealing with. Like, it's either you're, honestly, I thought you were gonna, like, it was gonna be like the birds, but with, like, flying squirrels or something.
Oh, that would have been good. Ian doubles over and screams, "My nuts!"
That would be fucking terrifying, though. Just like a fucking blanket of flying squirrels swarm you.
Yeah, especially with, like, you picture flying squirrels, and, like, the cartoon enthusiast in me pictures these squirrels, like, gracefully gliding around, but if you watch them, they still rocket to the earth like a plummeting, like, boulder. It's just slightly slowed down enough so that they don't squish when they hit the ground.
Well,
so you'd just
like,
be,
they'd
be like squirrel missiles.
Well, you think, like, oh, they're these little furry fucking rodent thingies, but, like, like, I'll be walking home from work and, like, these squirrels will be hopping alongside me and shit, and I just think, like, man, I don't know if I could take him. Like, like, if these things were a little more coordinated, I don't know if I could win that fight. Yeah.
See, my brain goes the other way. I'm completely overconfident in my skills. Like, I'll see a dog, and it could be like an 80, 90-pound dog, and it's like, I'm bigger than it, and I'm smarter. I could, like, yeah, it would hurt. I don't want to fight it, but I think I could survive it. It's like, no, that thing's all fucking muscle and teeth.
Right.
Like, I'd be dead in 2 seconds. But
see, but so I'm having that thought about like a 6-inch squirrel, because I'm just like, well, he's really fast. Fuck, I'll just get tired out and collapse, and then he'll just gnaw on me to death.
It's like the killer rabbit from Monty Python.
Yeah, pretty much.
So that's a great sort that I'll certainly be mining for more stories. Is like, go look up actual, like, creatures and be like, okay, what could be the story behind that?
Yeah. But, like most horror fiction, like, it's already been written before. You just have to apply it to a new set of characters.
Right. I was very tempted to make one about those, I forget what they're called, the watermelon head guys that you did a show
the
about.
Melon heads, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a hard one to do, though, because it's, like, inherently so fucking offensive.
Yeah.
But yeah, good story. Thank you for telling your wife to hold off on that whole baby thing for one more week.
The shows come out on Tuesdays, but we record on Thursdays. So next Thursday we'll be in the delivery room, and I'll be like, everybody quiet.
Everybody shut up, all right?
I've got the Discord app on my phone. We're going to do this thing.
Ben's trying to tell me about a spooky Mario story.
Give me 30 to 45 minutes. We'll be good.
Tell the bird to shut up. Why is the bird here?
I casually walk over and like unplug that machine, that like life support machine, because the beeping's bugging me. Like not out of malice, but you're not even thinking about it. You're just
somebody
like,
shut that clock
shut
up.
that thing.
All right. Well, Steve will be in prison for murder, I guess. Maybe you can knock it down to manslaughter, but
hey, I get phone calls.
Right. So
show must go on.
Yeah. Unless the baby comes, the show will go on. So we'll see you all next time. Farewell.
Toodaloo. That's my favorite one because it's stupid.